why do so many successful businesses, businesses with brilliant founders, just incredible products and massive market demand, why do they inevitably choke on their own momentum?
Yeah, it really is a paradox, isn't it?
It is. It's like you start something in your garage or your kitchen, and you pour your entire soul into it. It works, people love it, you hire a team, you grow, and then suddenly everything feels impossibly hard.
Right, like the wheels are just spinning.
Exactly. Every founder eventually hits this wall where sheer willpower and those 70-hour work weeks just aren't enough anymore. The momentum that used to feel exhilarating suddenly feels like it's literally crushing you.
Yeah, it becomes a weight.
So today, we are taking a deep dive into the invisible architecture of organizations. We're broadcasting, as always, from our little station right here on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas.
A beautiful morning for it, too.
It really is. The sun is hitting the pavement outside, coffee is in hand, and the hum of another workday is beginning all across the country. And today, we are asking a fundamental question about how that work actually gets done. Namely, why do companies, at a certain point of growth, discover they just desperately need an operating system?
Well, it is the defining bottleneck of almost every entrepreneurial journey. And it's the exact right question to frame our exploration of the source material today. Because when we talk about a business operating system, we are looking at one of the most prominent, codified attempts to solve that exact bottleneck.
Right, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS.
Exactly. EOS, which is heavily detailed in our stack of sources, particularly in the books Traction and What the Heck is EOS? But, our mission today goes way beyond just summarizing some management framework.
Yeah, we're not doing a book report here.
No, definitely not. We are going to deconstruct what EOS actually is mechanically, analyze why it has become so incredibly influential in the business world, and then, we are going to do something a bit different.
As we always do.
Right. We're going to hold this modern system up to the light of much older, larger traditions. We want to view it through the lens of craftsmanship, the nature of human work, and the economic philosophy of distributism.
Which is obviously a big deal for us here on Chesterton Radio, thinkers like J.K. Chesterton and Hilaire Belloc.
Exactly.
So I want to set the table clearly for anyone listening right now, whether you run a manufacturing plant, a tech startup, or just a corner bakery. This is an intellectual exploration of the philosophy of work and structure. We are not doing a management seminar today.
Nobody is here to sell you a corporate framework.
No, we are dissecting ideas. And our sources span a massive spectrum today. We've got modern business strategy from Jim Collins' Good to Great and Michael Gerber's The E-Myth Revisited.
We have classic economic theory, too, with Leonard Read's essay I, Pencil.
Yeah, and we have deep historical context on Catholic social teaching and distributism. So how do we connect the dots between a modern boardroom agenda and a 19th century socioeconomic philosophy?
Well, we have to start at ground zero.
Right. And ground zero is the realization that every single business, no matter how chaotic, actually has an operating system.
That is a fundamental truth that most founders completely miss. There is an inevitability to systems.
Unpack that a bit. What do you mean by inevitability?
Well, every human organization, whether it is intentionally designed by some architect or just thrown together by circumstance, develops routines. It develops customs, habits, and unspoken patterns of making decisions.
Even if nobody wrote them down?
Especially if nobody wrote them down. According to the What the Heck is EOS source, consider a company that has grown to 50 employees.
Okay, 50 people.
If you have 50 people who are showing up every day and they are doing things 50 different ways, the inevitable mathematical result is mass chaos.
Oh, absolutely.
The complexity doesn't just add up, it multiplies. A lot of founders look at their messy company and say, well, we don't have a system.
But they do.
That's incorrect, yes. You do have a system. It's just that your system is dysfunction. Your system is built on unspoken assumptions, heroic individual efforts, and constant firefighting.
Which makes me think of an analogy. An undocumented, unstructured company culture is basically a feral garden.
Oh, I like that. A feral garden?
Yeah, like if you plant a bunch of seeds in a plot of dirt and just walk away, it is going to grow. Nature abhors a vacuum and business abhors a standstill. It will grow on its own, absolutely.
Right.
But without a trellis, without stakes, without a gardener actively pruning, without an operating system, that feral garden inevitably tangles itself into just an unmanageable mess. The vines strangle the tomato plants, the weeds choke out the root vegetables. The whole thing becomes so dense that it literally blocks out its own sunlight.
It suffocates itself.
Exactly. And to understand why business becomes a feral garden, we have to look directly at the gardener. We have to look at the founder.
Yes, and our sources bring in Michael Gerber's classic book, The E-Myth Revisited, to explain this perfectly. Gerber points out exactly why founders become the ultimate bottlenecks in their own companies. He calls it the fatal assumption.
The fatal assumption. I love this concept. Walk us through it.
It is a brilliant diagnosis of entrepreneurial failure. So Gerber argues that just because you intimately understand the technical work of a business, you make the fatal assumption that you therefore understand the business of doing that technical work.
Okay, give me a concrete example.
Let's make it really concrete. Let's say you are just a masterful pie baker. You understand crusts, you understand fruit acidity, you bake a pie that literally brings people to tears.
Sounds delicious.
Right.
Yeah.
And because everyone loves your pies, you decide to open a bakery. The fatal assumption is believing that baking a pie and running a business that sells pies are the same discipline.
But they're not.
They are completely unrelated disciplines.
Right. If you want to bake pies all day, you should just get a job in a bakery. If you want to run a bakery, you are now in the business of supply chain logistics, commercial real estate leasing, human resources, health department compliance.
And marketing, payroll, yeah. Baking the pie is maybe 10% of the actual job of the owner.
If that. And Gerber breaks this internal struggle down into 3 conflicting personalities that live inside the mind of every single person who starts a business. He categorizes them as the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician.
And the tragedy here is that these 3 personalities are constantly at war with one another.
Oh yeah, constant war.
The entrepreneur is the visionary. This personality lives entirely in the future. They crave change, they see opportunities everywhere, and they just want to conquer new worlds. They are the spark.
But then you have the manager.
Right. The manager is deeply pragmatic. They live in the past and the present. They crave order, predictability, spreadsheets, and systems. They want to organize all the chaos that the entrepreneur just created.
And finally, you have the technician. The guy who just wants to bake the pie.
Exactly. The technician just wants to put their head down and do the actual work. The technician says, stop talking about a 10-year vision. Stop asking me to fill out a tracking spreadsheet. Just leave me alone and let me bake the pie.
The technician's ultimate mantra is, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself.
Yes.
Now, imagine the psychological toll this takes on a person.
Yeah.
When you have all 3 of these personalities fighting for control of the steering wheel inside one person's brain, what does that look like when it manifests on the outside?
It looks like pure organizational whiplash for the employees.
Total whiplash. The founder comes in on Monday as the entrepreneur, full of adrenaline, pitching this brilliant, radical new direction for the company. Everyone scrambles.
Yep.
Then on Wednesday, the founder wakes up as the manager, realizes the bank account is getting low, panics, and demands meticulous expense reports and daily check-in meetings from everyone.
And then by Friday,
the founder is so frustrated by the lack of progress that they turn into the technician. They literally push their staff out of the way, put on an apron, and start aggressively baking the pies themselves, muttering about how nobody else cares.
it's exhausting just to describe it, but it is the lived reality of countless small businesses. And this internal conflict, this constant cycling between the visionary, the bureaucrat, and the laborer directly leads to what EOS calls hitting the ceiling.
Hitting the ceiling, that's a huge concept in the sources.
It really is. According to our sources from the Traction Library, every growing company eventually outgrows the stage where the founder's sheer force of will, their adrenaline and charisma can solve every problem.
Right, because when you were 3 people in a garage, the founder can just yell across the room to fix an issue.
Exactly. But when you are 30 people or 50 people, you hit a ceiling of complexity. And when you hit that ceiling without a formalized system to manage the complexity, you experience a set of very predictable, universal frustrations.
The sources outline these frustrations so clearly, and I mean, they will sound painfully familiar to anyone listening who has run a business. First, there's a lack of profit.
Always the first sign.
You and your team are working harder than ever, putting in nights and weekends. But when the bookkeeper hands you the statement at the end of the month, the numbers just don't add up. The margin is gone.
And second, there are people problems. You feel like nobody is on the same page. You feel like nobody understands your vision, or worse, that nobody cares as much as you do.
Which is a terrible feeling. And third, there is this overwhelming, suffocating feeling that nothing is working. You try implementing a new project management software. You read a trendy new management book and try to implement its ideas. You bring in a consultant for a quick
And
fix.
your staff just rolls their
Yep.
eyes.
They become completely numb to the flavor of the month changes. The wheels are spinning furiously, but the car's just sinking deeper into the mud. There's no traction.
Which brings us perfectly to the proposed solution in our source stack, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System itself. And, it's important to understand the lineage here.
Yeah, where did this actually come from?
Well, EOS wasn't dreamed up overnight in an academic ivory tower or some university seminar by someone who has never made payroll. As our excerpts from Traction detail, it was forged and refined in the real world over 20 years by its creator, Gino Wickman.
Okay.
It is the culmination of thousands of hours of intense, hands-on facilitation sessions with actual leadership teams who were hitting that exact ceiling of complexity we just talked about.
So very practical.
Extremely. Its stated sweet spot isn't massive Fortune 500 conglomerates, and it's not solopreneurs. It is designed for open-minded, growth-oriented companies with roughly 10 to 250 employees.
That is the exact window where the feral garden becomes too big to manage by sheer willpower.
Exactly.
So it's heavily field-tested. But we really need to define what it actually is mechanically. It's easy to throw around a phrase like operating system, but we need to open the hood here. The sources lay out 6 key components of EOS. Let's dig into these mechanisms, because if we don't understand how the engine works, we can't evaluate the philosophy behind it later on.
Great. So component number 1 is vision.
But how does EOS define vision differently than, a corporate poster in a break room? We've all seen those.
Right, the eagle soaring over the mountain. That's the critical distinction. Vision in this context isn't a vague, inspirational mission statement about making the world a better place. It is highly tactical.
Tactical how?
It is about getting 100% of the leadership team, not just the founder, but the entire leadership team, on the exact same page regarding 2 things: where the company's going and exactly how it is going to get there.
Because usually they aren't.
Wickman's experience showed that in most companies, if you pull 5 leaders into separate rooms and ask them where the company is going over the next 3 years, you will get 5 entirely different, often conflicting answers.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. Vision is the mechanism of eliminating those discrepancies. It forces the leadership team to answer 8 specific questions, ranging from their core values to their 10-year target, all the way down to their 1-year plan, until there is absolutely no ambiguity.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about alignment, not just inspiration. Because if half the boat is rowing toward a buyout and half the boat is rowing toward generational family ownership, you're just going to spin in circles.
Exactly. Which brings us to component 2, people.
And again, this isn't just a platitude about hiring good people, right?
No. The sources introduce a very specific tool called the accountability chart, which is fundamentally different from a traditional organizational chart. The mantra here is getting the right people in the right seats.
Right people in the right seats. Break that down for me.
The phrasing is very deliberate. Right people refers to core values. Does this person fit the culture? Do they share the DNA of the organization?
Okay, so that's a cultural fit.
Yes. And then right seat refers to their unique abilities and cognitive capacity. Can they actually execute the specific responsibilities of the role?
How does that look on paper?
Well, an organizational chart just shows titles and who reports to whom. An accountability chart defines the 5 major roles and responsibilities for every single seat in the company. And the matrix is ruthless.
Ruthless.
You might have someone who is a wonderful cultural fit, the absolute right person who everyone loves, but they are terrible at their actual job. They are in the wrong seat.
Oh, man. We've all worked with that person. You love them, but they drop the ball every time.
Right. Or conversely, you might have a top-performing salesperson who hits every quota, but they are incredibly toxic to the culture. They are the wrong person in the right seat. The EOS philosophy argues that both scenarios are eventually fatal to the business and must be corrected.
Wow. It forces founders to stop making excuses for bad fits. But to know if a seat is actually performing, you can't just rely on gut feelings, which leads naturally to the third component, data.
Yes, data.
This is about moving away from subjective emotions, egos, and guesswork. Founders love to run on instinct, EOS forces the implementation of objective scorecards.
The scorecard is meant to be a pulse check. Instead of looking at a massive lagging profit and loss statement at the end of the month, the leadership team identifies a handful of forward-looking, activity-based numbers.
Give me an example of an activity-based number.
Things you can measure weekly. How many sales calls were made? How many customer complaints were received? How many units were actually shipped off the dock? It removes the emotion from management.
Because the numbers don't lie.
Exactly. When a number is off track, the scorecard tells the absolute truth about the health of the organization, cutting through the noise and the stories people tell themselves to justify poor performance.
Which acts as a perfect trigger for the fourth component, issues. Because if you have a clear vision, you know who the right people are in the right seats, and your data is exposing the truth weekly, well, you are inevitably going to shine a massive, uncomfortable spotlight on everything that is broken in the company.
It's true. The sources explicitly say that under the system there is nowhere to hide.
Nowhere to hide. And to deal with these exposed problems, EOS uses a specific mechanism called the IDS track: identify, discuss, solve.
The IDS track is perhaps the most psychologically demanding part of the entire system.
Why is that?
Because in most corporate meetings, teams spend hours discussing the symptoms of a problem, politicking, deflecting blame, and eventually agreeing on a superficial Band-Aid just so they can finally leave the room.
I have been in those meetings. They are soul-crushing.
The IDS mechanism structurally prevents that. Identify forces the team to dig through the symptoms to find the true underlying root cause. Discuss is where the team debates the root cause with absolute brutal honesty, which requires immense psychological safety, by the way. And then solve means deciding on a permanent action step that makes the issue go away forever.
It's the difference between taking an aspirin for a headache versus realizing you need glasses because you're squinting at your screen all day.
Yeah.
Fix the root cause.
Exactly.
Okay, so the fifth component is process. This is where we hear the echoes of Michael Gerber's E-Myth most clearly, I think.
Yeah.
Process is about documenting the quote-unquote way your business does things. And what I appreciate in the sources is that it explicitly warns against creating some 500-page standard operating procedure manual that just gathers dust on a shelf.
Yeah, nobody reads those. Over-documentation is just as paralyzing as no documentation.
Right.
The EOS approach to process is to document only the core 20% of the steps that produce 80% of the results. It is about finding the highest leverage actions in HR, in marketing, in operations, and standardizing them. This is the real engine of scalability.
Because then it's repeatable.
Exactly. When your core processes are clear and followed by everyone, your business transforms from a daily, unpredictable gamble based on who showed up to work that day into a highly reliable, consistent machine.
And finally, we hit component 6, traction. Because as the old saying goes, vision without traction is just hallucination. You can have the best 10-year target in the world, but if nobody knows what they're supposed to do this Tuesday, you're dead in the water.
Right. The sources highlight two major behavioral tools here. First, rocks. These are clear, strictly defined 90-day priorities.
Why exactly 90 days?
Because human beings generally lose focus and start drifting after about 90 days. It resets the company's attention span.
That makes sense.
And the second tool is the level 10 meeting.
Break down the level 10 meeting for us, because this sounds intense.
It is a fascinating piece of organizational architecture. It is a strictly timed 90-minute weekly leadership meeting with an unbending agenda.
Wait, 90 minutes every single week?
Yes, but it is designed specifically to eliminate all the endless, time-wasting status updates that plague most corporate meetings during the rest of the week. Instead, the vast majority of those 90 minutes is dedicated solely to the IDS track prioritizing conflict, debating the most critical issues, and solving them.
So you're actually getting work done in the meeting, not just talking about work.
Exactly. The meeting starts on time, it ends on time, and every attendee rates it on a scale of 1 to 10 at the conclusion to enforce accountability to the format.
Okay, so we have the 6 components. But what makes this really dynamic is how these components interact with the specific leadership psychology outlined in other of our sources, the book Rocket Fuel, which is co-authored by Gino Wickman.
Ah, yes. Rocket fuel.
This book zooms in with a microscope on the people component, specifically looking at the very top of the accountability chart. It argues that for an entrepreneurial company to truly scale and thrive, it almost always requires 2 distinct, often opposing roles working in a tight tandem: the visionary and the integrator.
This dynamic is crucial to understanding why founders burn out. The rocket fuel source paints a very vivid psychological portrait of the visionary.
Right.
This is typically the founding entrepreneur, They are an idea generator. I mean, they might have 20 new ideas before breakfast. They are big picture thinkers, they are deeply passionate, and they are usually fantastic at closing big deals or wooing key partners.
But there's a catch.
A massive catch. They often have ADD-like tendencies. They get bored easily by routine. They hate the weeds of management. They operate in these massive 90-day spikes of incredible, disruptive progress, followed by complete exhaustion.
And crucially, they leave a wake of operational chaos behind them for their staff to clean up.
Yes. If you are a founder listening to this, you might feel a little exposed right now because that describes so many entrepreneurs perfectly. They are the spark plug, but they are not the transmission.
That is a great way to put it. And that is exactly why Rocket Fuel argues they desperately need an integrator. The integrator is the counterbalance. This is the person who thrives on taking the visionary's chaos and creating order out of it.
They love the spreadsheets.
They love the spreadsheets. They sweat the minute details. They act as the steady heartbeat of the day-to-day operations. They are the ones who filter the visionary's 20 daily ideas, kill the 19 bad ones, and methodically execute the one good one.
And the thesis is that neither of these personality types can build a truly great, scalable company alone.
Right.
The visionary without an integrator creates a chaotic, constantly pivoting mess. The integrator without a visionary creates a stagnant, bureaucratic company that never innovates, but when they are aligned, they create rocket fuel.
It is profound structural recognition of human limitation. But, you know, as we look at this whole system, the 90-day rocks, the level 10 agendas, the accountability chart, the scorecard, we have to acknowledge the obvious critique here. Well, I have to push back here on behalf of our listeners. When I read through these sources, so much of this sounds incredibly basic. Setting goals for the quarter, having a weekly meeting with an agenda, figuring out who reports to whom, measuring your key numbers. I mean, this isn't quantum physics.
No, it's not.
So why do companies need a branded, trademarked system, and why do they often pay tens of thousands of dollars for an outside implementer to come in and teach them to do things that seem like absolute common sense?
It's a very fair critique, and it raises a vital point about human psychology versus business mechanics. The concepts are incredibly simple. A child could understand a 90-day rock, but as the sources repeatedly point out, simple does not mean easy.
Right.
The barrier to execution isn't intellectual, it is psychological. The primary hurdle for a founder is a concept EOS calls letting go of the vine.
Letting go of the vine. Explain the mechanics of that fear.
So when a founder births a company, their entire identity is wrapped up in it. For years, they have survived by being the central node of all information and all decision-making. Every problem was solved by their personal intervention.
They were the superhero.
Yes. To implement an operating system means relinquishing that central control. It means trusting a formalized structure over your own gut instinct. It means allowing an integrator to run the day-to-day operations and actually listening to them when they tell you no.
Which is incredibly hard for an entrepreneur.
It is. It means allowing an objective scorecard to flash red and tell you that you are failing in a specific area, rather than spinning a narrative to protect your ego. Letting go of the vine requires a profound, painful level of humility and vulnerability.
So the system is just a mirror, in a way.
Exactly. The operating system isn't valuable because it's complicated. It's valuable because it acts as an objective, emotionless third party that holds a founder accountable to their own business. It forces them to undergo the excruciating transition from being a superhero to being a systematic leader.
That transition from superhero to architect is brutal. And this perfectly bridges us into the broader context of our deep dive today. EOS didn't just invent these concepts in a vacuum. When we look at why it became so popular, we see that it acts as a synthesis.
A synthesis of what?
Well, it takes the grand abstract theories of major business philosophers and operationalizes them into a daily checklist. Let's bring Jim Collins into the conversation here. His landmark book, Good to Great, is in our source stack.
Ah, yes. A classic.
Right. Collins and his research team analyzed 1,435 companies over 40 years to find the tiny fraction that made the leap from merely good to truly great. And his massive data-driven findings map almost flawlessly onto the mechanics of EOS.
The parallels are striking. Let's take Collins' famous concept of the flywheel effect.
Walk us through the flywheel.
Collins observed that greatness is never the result of a single miracle moment. It's never a radical overnight revolution or a singular brilliant product launch, even if the business media portrays it that way in retrospect. Collins compares building a great company to pushing a massive 25-ton metal disc, a flywheel, mounted on an axle.
Okay, 25 tons.
At first, you push with all your might just to get it to move 1 inch. It takes immense, agonizing effort. But you keep pushing consistently in the exact same direction, turn upon turn, month upon month. Eventually, the momentum builds, the weight of the flywheel starts working in your favor, and it begins to spin with unstoppable force.
And when you look at EOS, you realize that the entire traction component is just a mechanical blueprint for pushing the flywheel. The rigid discipline of setting 90-day rocks, the relentless cadence of the weekly level 10 meeting, the weekly review of the scorecard, none of these are glamorous. They are boring, sustained, disciplined pushes on the flywheel in the exact same direction.
EOS is just the schedule for pushing the heavy disc.
Exactly. And then consider another foundational Collins principle. First, who, then what?
The bus analogy.
Right. Collins tells the incredible story of David Maxwell taking over as CEO of Fannie Mae in 1981, at a time when the company was losing $1 million every single day.
Wow.
Maxwell didn't walk in on day one with a brand new visionary strategy. He didn't start with the what. He started with the who. He sat down with every single executive, told them honestly that it was going to be a brutal, exhausting ride to turn the company around, and he invited anyone who wasn't fully committed to get off the bus right then.
That takes guts.
He demanded the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus before he even tried to figure out where to drive it.
Which is the precise philosophical underpinning of the EOS people component and the accountability chart. Getting the right people in the right seats. It's an acknowledgement that strategy is useless without alignment. If you have a brilliant 10-year vision, but you have the wrong people in the key seats on the bus, as Collins proves, nothing else matters. Great vision executed by mediocre or misaligned people still produces disastrous results. You have to fix the who before the what.
And we absolutely cannot forget Collins' hedgehog concept. This is based on the ancient Greek parable by Archilochus. The fox knows many small things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing.
The fox tries 100 different complex strategies to catch the hedgehog, right?
Right, but the hedgehog just rolls into a spiky ball. One simple, perfect defense that works every time. Collins found that great companies figure out their one big thing at the intersection of three circles. What they can be the absolute best in the world at, what drives their core economic engine, and what their people are deeply, authentically passionate about.
Our sources give the example of Wells Fargo for this. In the 1970s, they realized they could never be the best, most glamorous global bank in the world. Citicorp had that market cornered. So instead of fighting a losing battle, Wells Fargo pulled back. They abandoned international operations entirely to focus solely on running a highly utilitarian, incredibly profitable, slightly boring bank in the Western United States.
They found their hedgehog.
They found their hedgehog, and EOS operationalizes this directly into the vision component, specifically through the brutal discipline of what they call the stop doing list.
The stop doing list. That sounds painful.
It is. Once you define your hedgehog, you have to look at everything else your company is doing and physically stop doing it. You have to kill your pet projects if they don't fit the three circles.
The synthesis of great business thought doesn't end with Collins, though. We can loop Michael Gerber back in here. We discuss his concept of the three personalities, but Gerber's E-Myth also introduces the turnkey revolution and the idea of the franchise prototype.
And he uses McDonald's as the ultimate example for that.
Yes. Ray Kroc didn't build a global empire because he hired extraordinary Michelin star chefs. He built an empire because he engineered an extraordinary system that ordinary people, even high school kids, could operate with total predictability. Every single variable, from the exact temperature of the fry oil to the precise placement of the pickle on the burger, is documented and standardized.
And that draws a massive, bold line straight to the EOS process component. The idea of documenting your core processes so that your business isn't entirely dependent on a few unreplicable, highly paid superstars. You systemize the routine so you can humanize the exception.
That's a great phrase. Systemize the routine, humanize the exception.
And the ultimate connection between Gerber's philosophy and EOS is the end goal for the founder, working on your business rather than working in it.
Right.
Both frameworks operate on the premise that the business should be a distinct entity that serves the founder's life goals rather than a master that consumes the founder's life. If you are indispensable to the daily operations, you don't own a business, you just own a very stressful, poorly paying job.
I think the best way to synthesize this for our listeners is an analogy. Think of building a house. Jim Collins is the master architect. He surveys the landscape, he provides the grand blueprints, and he tells you the profound why and what of how a great structure withstands a hurricane.
Okay, I'm following.
Michael Gerber is the motivational speaker and psychologist who grabs you by the shoulders, shakes you, and changes your fundamental mindset about what it even means to be a builder. But Gino Wickman and EOS, they are the general contractors.
We're contractors.
They aren't trying to be profound. They just hand you a hammer, a box of nails, and a schedule, and they say, here's exactly how you hit this board on a Tuesday morning at 9:00 a.m. It is the relentless operationalization of high-level theory.
That is a very precise way to frame it. The architect, the psychologist, and the contractor. And this general contractor approach, the focus on mechanics, on checklists, on measurable data, it deeply appeals to a very specific type of mind.
The engineering mind.
Yes. It appeals inherently to the engineering and technical mindset. Engineers, by their nature and training, do not rely on hope. They think in terms of systems, architecture, feedback loops, and continuous measurable improvement.
Right. If you are an engineer building a suspension bridge or writing a massive piece of enterprise software, you don't just rely on good vibes and a fun weekend team-building retreat to make sure the bridge doesn't collapse.
No, that would be
You
terrifying.
need schematics. You need interfaces. And this brings us back to the what the heck is EOS source and its focus on minimizing complexity. When those 50 people are doing things 50 different ways, the sheer friction of that complexity causes systemic failure. A structured operating system acts like an API in software development and application programming interface.
Expand on that API analogy because it perfectly describes the function of organizational process.
Okay, so in software, an API allows two completely different programs to talk to each other without knowing how the other program is coded. In a business, the sales department and the operations department are basically two different software modules running on completely different logic.
Very different logic.
Right. Sales wants to promise the moon to close the deal. Operations wants to standardize everything to keep costs low. If they just crash into each other every day, the company fails. EOS, the scorecards, the level 10 meetings, the documented processes acts as the API. It is the agreed-upon interface that allows sales and operations to communicate, share data, and resolve conflicts without crashing the whole system.
And understanding how humans cooperate within these interfaces brings us to one of the most remarkable and profound documents in our source material. Leonard E. Read's classic 1958 economic essay, Pencil.
Oh, I was so glad this was in our source stack. It is a masterpiece. For those who haven't read it, it's an essay written entirely from the perspective of an ordinary yellow wooden lead pencil.
Yes, the pencil traces its own family tree, and right at the beginning it makes a staggering, almost unbelievable claim. The pencil says not a single person on the face of this earth knows how to make me.
Which sounds completely absurd at first glance. It's a pencil. But when Reed unpacks the geography and the supply chain, it becomes undeniably true.
It's staggering when you actually map it out.
Right. The pencil explains that its wood is straight-grain cedar from Oregon. Harvesting that cedar requires loggers. Those loggers require specialized saws, which requires steel, which requires iron ore mining and smelting. The loggers drink coffee and need housing. The graphite inside the pencil isn't local. It's mined in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, and mixed with clay from Mississippi.
The eraser requires pumice from Italy and rapeseed oil from the Dutch East Indies.
Yes. And the little metal band holding the eraser, the ferrule, is made of brass, which requires mining zinc and copper.
When you map it all out, there are literally millions of human beings involved in the creation of a single disposable pencil. Millions of people who speak different languages, practice different religions, and who might even be at war with each other if they met face to face. Yet they all cooperate seamlessly to produce this item.
It's incredible.
And here is the crucial revolutionary point that the economist Milton Friedman makes in his introduction to the essay. No one sitting in a central office gave orders to these thousands of people. No military police enforced the orders that were not given.
It is the miracle of spontaneous coordination. These millions of people are not cooperating because they all deeply love pencils. They're guided only by price signals and dispersed localized knowledge. The logger in Oregon just wants to exchange his labor for a wage to feed his family. The miner in Sri Lanka wants the same. The global market coordinates their actions without a dictator.
Exactly.
So, here is the intellectual leap for our deep dive today. How do we connect the macroeconomics of Pencil to a 50-person machine shop running on EOS?
It is a deeply structural connection. An operating system like EOS is, in essence, an attempt to create internal signals inside a privately planned economy, which is what a corporation is.
A privately planned economy.
Right. When a company is very small, say 3 people, the founder acts like a central dictator. They make every single decision, they allocate all resources, but as the company grows to 50 or 100 people, central planning fails, just as it fails in national macroeconomics.
Because the dictator can't process all the information.
Precisely. The founder becomes the bottleneck because they don't have the localized knowledge of the frontline worker.
Ah, this is brilliant. So by implementing the EOS tools, the objective scorecards replacing the founder's gut feeling, the specific 90-day rocks giving localized goals, the accountability chart defining specific domains of authority, EOS is basically setting up an internal market of information.
Yes. It allows the company to function less like a dictatorship and more like a mini-market. Individuals and departments are given autonomy within their specific seat. They act using their dispersed, on-the-ground knowledge the CEO doesn't have, but they remain perfectly aligned toward a common vision because the internal signals of the scorecard and the rocks are crystal clear.
Just like the price signals for the logger.
Exactly. The employees don't need the CEO to tell them exactly what to do every hour, just as the logger in Oregon doesn't need a global dictator to tell him to cut wood for the pencil factory. The system coordinates the behavior through clear signals and boundaries.
Okay, we are humming now. Let's take this down an even deeper philosophical path. We are broadcasting from Chesterton Radio, so it is time to bring the namesake of our station into the room. I want you, the listener, to imagine a scenario. Imagine G.K. Chesterton with his massive frame, his cape, his walking stick, and his deep suspicion of modernity, walking into a highly successful, hyper-efficient 200-person software company that is running perfectly on EOS.
I love this thought experiment.
Right. The level 10 meetings are humming along exactly at 90 minutes. The scorecards are all green. The Jim Collins flywheel is spinning. The processes are documented to perfection. What would Chesterton see? And more importantly, what disruptive questions would he ask the leadership team?
That scenario gets right to the heart of the essential tension we have to explore today. EOS, by its very architectural design, is heavily focused on simplicity, scalability, efficiency, predictability, and ultimately profitability. It is about building a well-oiled, frictionless machine.
But Chesterton wouldn't just accept that as a good thing.
No, not at all. Chesterton, along with his great friend and collaborator Hilaire Belloc, looked at the world and human labor very differently. Chesterton would look at this perfectly tuned corporate machine, tap his walking stick on the ground, and ask a devastatingly simple question. Is efficiency the highest possible goal of human collaboration?
Right. What is a business actually for in the grand scheme of human existence? Can a company be perfectly healthy by EOS standards, hitting every revenue target, solving every issue on the IDS track, but be completely devoid of beauty? What happened to the soul of the work when everything is reduced to a process and a metric?
To truly understand this critique, we have to pull from our sources on Belloc and Chesterton, and specifically look at Belloc's seminal 1912 book, The Servile State.
This is servile state.
Yes, Belloc was terrified of the trajectory of industrial capitalism. He feared a society where capital and the state collude to create a system where the vast majority of workers are compelled, either by positive law or by inescapable economic necessity, to produce wealth for a tiny elite minority of owners.
So he feared a return to servitude, essentially.
He feared that stripping economic independence and ownership away from the average worker would create a modern, sanitized form of servitude.
So if we apply Belloc's fear to the modern corporation, if you actively turn a business into a well-oiled machine where the system is the star, does that inherently view the human employees as disposable cogs? I mean, let's really wrestle with this. Can joy or human flourishing appear on an EOS scorecard?
It's a tough question.
When Michael Gerber explicitly advises us in the EMIS to build processes that can be operated by people with the lowest possible level of skill in order to ensure predictable results, I mean, what does that do to the dignity of craftsmanship? What happens to the concept of vocation, of being called to a craft, when your job is just to follow step 14 on a checklist designed by someone else?
It is a profound, penetrating critique of modern management. If the ultimate goal of a business is to create a franchise prototype where every single action is heavily documented, rigidly standardized, and idiot-proof so that anyone with the absolute lowest skill level can swap in and do it, you are deliberately, systemically engineering out the need for human mastery.
You're removing the craft.
You are engineering out the need for craftsmanship. You are intentionally de-skilling the labor force to protect the reliability of the system. Chesterton and Belloc could argue that a man's property, his control over his tools, and his pursuit of mastery in his craft are absolutely central to his human dignity. If you remove the mastery and make him a cog, you degrade his humanity no matter how efficient the system is.
That is a heavy indictment. But, I have to play defense here for a second because I don't think it is entirely fair to frame EOS, or structured management, simply as a tool for corporate oppression.
Go on.
Let's think back to the reality of the undocumented, chaotic, feral garden company we discussed at the beginning. Having no system isn't a utopia of craftsmanship. A feral company is often a deeply toxic nightmare for the workers.
Yes, that's very true.
The founder is screaming because they're stressed. Expectations are constantly shifting based on the founder's mood swings. People are fired unfairly because there is no data to prove their value, only office politics.
That is a crucial counterpoint. The absence of structure often breeds tyranny. EOS demands open and honest leadership teams. Look at the IDS track. Identify, discuss, solve. That mechanism fundamentally requires psychological safety to function.
Right. You can't be honest if you're terrified.
Exactly. You cannot get to the root of a problem if everyone in the room is terrified that the visionary will fire them for speaking the truth. By forcing transparency, demanding clear expectations through the accountability chart, and instituting regular, predictable communication, an operating system might actually reduce workplace toxicity.
Provide safe boundaries.
It provides clear boundaries. And within those safe, predictable boundaries, an employee might actually find more dignity, less anxiety, and more freedom to do good work than they ever would in the chaotic, whimsical dictatorship of an unstructured business.
It's the paradox of structure. The trellis doesn't choke the tomato plant. It gives the support it needs to bear fruit without rotting on the ground. Okay, so if we hold that tension, the modern desire for scalable efficiency versus the classical need for human dignity, mastery, and ownership, we arrive at the economic philosophy of distributism.
Yes. Distributism is the socio-economic theory championed by the Chester Belloc, the intellectual partnership of Chesterton and Belloc. As our encyclopedia sources explain, it was formed around the start of the 20th century. It was heavily, deeply influenced by Catholic social teaching, particularly Pope Leo III's groundbreaking 1891 encyclical Rerum Novarum, which addressed the conditions of the working classes during the Industrial Revolution.
And we need to be very clear about what distributism is, because it often gets misunderstood today. As the sources outline, it is explicitly positioned as a third way, an alternative to both elite, laissez-faire capitalism on one side and state-controlled socialism on the other.
Right, it's neither of those.
It is not about the state redistributing wealth. It is about the widespread distribution of the means of production. The famous, albeit folksy, slogan was, 3 acres and a cow. The ideal society is one characterized by widespread private ownership of property, housing, and control of industry, through owner-operated small businesses, family farms, local guilds, and worker-controlled cooperatives.
Exactly. Distributism rests on 2 massive philosophical pillars: solidarity and subsidiarity.
Subsidiarity, let's define that.
Solidarity is the unwavering commitment to the common good and the recognition of our shared humanity. Subsidiarity, which was classically articulated by Pope Pius VIII in his 1931 encyclical Quadragesimo Annuale, is the structural principle that no larger or higher unit of organization should perform a function that a smaller or lower unit can accomplish perfectly well.
So keep it local.
Keep it as local as possible. You don't have the federal government fix a pothole if the municipal town council can do it. You don't have the town council fix it if the neighborhood association can do it. Power and decision-making should always remain as close to the local level as possible.
So here is the ultimate collision of our deep dive today. Here's the question for the modern entrepreneur. Is EOS conceptually compatible with a distributist business? If someone listening right now wants to run a family farm, a local artisanal guild, or a 50-person worker-owned cooperative, can they implement EOS? Or is it fundamentally a tool of elite capitalism?
It is an area of massive ideological friction, but there is a deeply surprising connection when we look at that principle of subsidiarity.
Really? Tell me.
EOS, in its actual mechanics, is highly compatible with subsidiarity. Think about the accountability chart. Think about the concept of assigning specific rocks to specific individuals. By forcing the leadership team to assign distinct, measurable responsibilities to specific seats, EOS actually forces the founder to push decision-making, autonomy, and ownership down the organizational chart to the lowest possible level.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of it that way.
It actively fights the founder's narcissistic urge to micromanage. It says, this person in this seat owns this rock. You do not touch it. Let them execute it. In a corporate context, that is a textbook application of subsidiarity.
That is a fascinating insight. It decentralizes the execution. It forces the dictator to become an advisor. But, and there's a massive but here, and I know you see it coming.
Bring it on.
EOS, like almost all modern management frameworks we study, implicitly assumes a traditional hierarchical employer-employee dynamic. It assumes the existence of capital owners at the top and wage laborers at the bottom.
Correct. That is where the friction becomes palpable. The ideological clash lies in the ultimate ownership and authority of the enterprise. In a distributist model, especially for larger industrial enterprises where cooperative ownership is necessary, like the large factories or rail networks that Bellick discussed, the power structure is inherently democratized. The workers own the shares.
Right. So how on earth does the visionary and integrator dynamic from rocket fuel work in a worker-owned cooperative? The visionary is typically the founder-owner, acting with unilateral authority from the top down. If the visionary is essentially an elected board of workers or a rotating committee of owners, does the fast-paced, decisive EOS model just completely break down? Does EOS subtly assume and therefore culturally enforce a top-down hierarchical capitalism?
It is a question that requires deep nuance, and there is no simple binary answer. EOS is, at its core, a framework. It is a wrench.
A wrench.
Arguably, it is a neutral tool. A wrench does not possess a moral philosophy. It doesn't care if it is tightening a bolt on a billionaire's corporate jet or a community-owned tractor. It just turns the bolt. However, the vocabulary of the tool phrases like lowest possible skill, franchise prototype, and positioning the visionary as the undisputed apex of the chart, well, it carries the cultural assumptions of the era and the economic system in which it was built.
Right, it brings its baggage with it.
If a distributist cooperative wanted to use EOS, they wouldn't have to discard the wrench, but they would likely have to radically adapt the intent behind the tools.
Give me an example of adapting the intent. How would that actually look?
For instance, the scorecard. Instead of the scorecard purely measuring profit margins and units shipped, a distributist business would adapt it to also measure human flourishing.
Like tracking employee well-being.
Yes. They might track the retention of apprentices, the reduction of mandatory overtime, or metrics related to community impact. Regarding process, instead of standardizing processes to de-skill the worker and make them replaceable, they would use process to train the worker faster, empowering them to achieve mastery and eventually become an owner. The mechanics remain the same. The telos, the ultimate purpose of the system, shifts entirely.
That is a phenomenal distinction. The mechanics versus the telos. Using the trellis to grow better fruit, not just to control the vine. Which brings us perfectly to the final phase of our discussion today. We have spent an hour up in the philosophical clouds debating macroeconomics and 19th century encyclicals. Let's bring this back down to the pavement on Commercial Street. Let's make it actionable.
Let's do it.
Imagine someone listening right now. They are driving to work. They are starting a machine shop tomorrow, or they are scaling a software firm, or maybe they're taking over their grandfather's construction company. What are the practical, timeless takeaways they can extract from this massive stack of sources?
The first, and perhaps most vital lesson across all the sources, is the absolute necessity of brutal self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
Borrowing heavily from rocket fuel, you must ruthlessly identify whether you are naturally a visionary or an integrator. You cannot be both effectively at scale. If you are a visionary, you have to look in the mirror and realize that your greatest strength, your relentless ambition and endless stream of new ideas is simultaneously your team's greatest source of torture.
It's hard to admit that.
It is. Your first, most urgent priority must be to find your integrator. Stop trying to force yourself to manage the daily spreadsheets if it drains your soul and makes you miserable. Find the person who loves the spreadsheets. Give them the authority and get out of their way.
And the flip side of that is just as important. If you are an integrator, you need to stop feeling guilty that you aren't the charismatic, stage-pacing ideas person. The visionary might get the magazine covers, but the business will literally die without you executing the details and keeping the promises they make. Embrace your role as the heartbeat.
Well said.
The second timeless takeaway I see comes straight from Jim Collins. The stop doing list. You have to find your hedgehog concept, that rare intersection of your passion, your economic engine, and what you can legitimately be the best in the world at. And once you find it, you have to relentlessly, aggressively stop doing everything else.
The discipline of stopping is incredibly rare. Collins tells the story of Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark. To focus on consumer paper goods like Kleenex and fight Procter & Gamble, Smith literally sold off Kimberly-Clark's legacy paper mills.
which was their core business at one point.
It was. It was terrifying. It dropped their stock price initially, and the business press mocked him. But it was the only way to fund their hedgehog, and it ultimately made them dominant. The question for the entrepreneur listening is, what are your legacy paper mills? What are the distracting product lines, the legacy clients, the side projects that you need to kill today to save your core business?
A third massive takeaway is the IDS track: identify, discuss, solve. I actually think this goes far beyond business management. It is a fundamental human relationship skill.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about applying IDS to your marriage, to your community board, to your church council. Stop talking in circles around the symptoms of a problem. Stop managing the optics just to avoid hurting people's feelings. Have the courage to identify the true root cause, discuss it with total honesty and vulnerability, and solve it permanently. The amount of human energy wasted on managing symptoms is just staggering.
It is staggering. But, as we offer this advice, we also have to recognize the role of scale and prudence. While these principles, alignment, accountability, root cause problem solving, are universal, the specific application of the tools requires immense judgment based on the size of the enterprise.
Right. You don't use a sledgehammer to hang a picture frame.
Exactly. A 3-person machine shop does not need to hire a professional facilitator and fly to a resort for a 2-day quarterly off-site retreat to build a 10-year vision deck. That is over-engineering.
Total overkill.
But that same 3-person shop does need to sit down over a cup of coffee on a Monday morning, look each other in the eye, and agree on their 3 main rocks for the next 90 days. They do need an accountability chart, even if it's just drawn on a napkin, so everyone knows exactly who is responsible for ordering the steel and who is responsible for calling the clients. The complexity of the tool must scale proportionally to the complexity of the problem.
That is the perfect grounding. We have covered an immense amount of terrain today. We started in the chaos of the feral garden. We looked at the exhausted founder dealing with the fatal assumption. We built the EOS machine component by component.
We pushed Jim Collins' heavy metal flywheel.
We did. We traced the global lineage of Leonard Reed's pencil, and we sat down for a long, intense debate with Chesterton and Belloc about the soul of human work.
It has been a truly comprehensive journey through both the daily mechanics of business and the enduring philosophy of human labor.
And as we bring it all back home, back to our little studio here on Commercial Street in Atchison, the coffee in our mugs is gone, the sun is fully up, and the workday has officially begun out there. Whether you are walking onto a loud factory floor, logging into a remote Zoom call from your kitchen, or unlocking the front door to your own retail shop, we want to leave you with one final provocative reflection to carry with you.
We've talked extensively today about the necessity of systems to manage human complexity. Every civilization eventually develops systems. Every successful business eventually develops processes. The real question is not whether we will have systems. The question is whether our systems exist to serve people or whether people eventually begin serving the system.
That is a profound thought.
And as we look to the horizon of business, the nature of these systems is radically changing. As you start your workday today, consider this. With the rapid rise of artificial intelligence, algorithmic management, and automated decision-making, are we moving toward a near future where the integrator of a company is no longer a human being at all, but a piece of code?
Wow.
And if the operating system itself becomes artificial, if algorithms are setting the rocks, measuring the scorecards, and managing the processes, what does that mean for the human dignity of the technician? If a machine is running the machine, what is the role of the human soul in the architecture of work?
That is the question we will be wrestling with for the next decade. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. If you want to continue this exploration of the profound intersection of entrepreneurship, engineering, philosophy, and the common good, please visit us at chestertonradio.com. You can subscribe to our Substack to get our detailed notes and reading lists, and you can listen live alongside your fellow builders and thinkers anytime at live.chestertonradio.com. Until next time, keep building, keep pruning your garden, and keep asking the big questions.